the first thing that I like to do is test what kind of story we have. What's the story? Whose story is it? Now, when I write and when I read other people's works, I always ask these questions, and I can start it very early on. If I'm looking at a short story, which might be only about 10 pages, 4 pages, whatever, I want to know what the story is at the bottom of the first page. Sometimes when it's flash fiction and it runs maybe 750 words, I want to know in the first paragraph that there is a story, and I want to know whose story it is. That's really important. Two very, very important questions. What's the story? Whose story is it? Very important. It also allows us at any point to give us guidance in editing. Well, if this is the story, should that be on the page? If this is the character whose story it is, how come we have 5 other characters happening first? I picked up a piece the other day, and the main character didn't appear until the bottom of the first page. And by then I had identified as a reader with a different character. So I thought it was going to be her story, but it was, no, his story. And I have a favorite story of someone who wanted me to read their book. And I said, well, I only read the first 40 or 60 pages first off. And if you want to start that way, then I'll eventually read your book. But I read a small segment first. And he said, well, no, you have to read the first 117 pages. And well, what does that mean? I didn't know what that meant. I said, well, that's too much. I'll know what I need to know about whether I can work with you, et cetera, et cetera. He said, oh, no, page 117. You got to get to page 117. So we worked out a situation where I was willing to sit down and read 117 pages against my better judgment. And I got to page 40, and oh my God, it was painful going. It was just, I'm not even going to tell you all the parts to it, but it was very painful. And I felt very much caught in a predicament because I had promised to read 117 pages. And I debated, and I walked around the house, and I argued with my dog. And then I finally called him up, and I said, I can't get to page 117. And he said, what? You can't get to page 117? I need you to get to page 117. And I said, why? Why do I have to get to page 117? He said, because that's where the story starts. So what's the story and whose story is it are important, and they're important from the very beginning. You don't have to think about it while you're writing. You think about it when you're going back and looking at what you have. It's a way of evaluating. And so what we do is we ask those questions, and we also think about how we answer them. Is it easier to answer the question, what's the story? Or is it easier to answer, whose story is it? That's important. If we can easily articulate the story, then we probably have a plot-driven story. If we can easily articulate whose story it is, then we probably have a character-based story. That's going to give us information about the arc.